You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Seattle's comprehensive plan has hit a snag. The comp plan is the set of zoning changes that plans the city's future growth. The current one in the works outlines a lot more housing density in the city. State law requires such a plan to be in place, but Seattle's has been delayed by administrative appeals from two groups. On Wednesday, we spoke with Seattle councilmember Eddie Lin about his proposal to eliminate one of the paths people have to appeal the plan under the State Environmental Policy Act. Among other things, Lin has said that the process was too vulnerable to misuse by well-resourced special interests.
For me, it's anti-democratic and it's just bureaucracy and not democracy.
Today, I'm speaking with Jennifer Godfrey. She filed one of the appeals currently delaying implementation of the comp plan and formed the group Orca Nexus, which is advocating for more environmental review of Seattle's zoning changes. They claim the comprehensive plan's environmental impact statement did not fully evaluate the environmental impact of greater housing density on trees and runoff. And they say removing trees will increase pollutants that could harm humans, salmon, and especially endangered southern resident killer whales. Jennifer Godfrey joins me now with more. Thank you very much for being here, Jennifer, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just for a little bit of background, you are a bassist with the Seattle Symphony. You play upright bass. What motivated you to get involved with this fight over how the city reviewed the environmental impact of its comp plan?
Well, I received notice that there was a meeting about something called an environmental impact statement, and I attended the meeting and I saw that the southern resident killer whales were not included in the document. And it actually said the only endangered and state-listed species known or expected to use Seattle as habitat are fish, which is not true. So that really piqued my interest. So I attended about 10 months of meetings without success, asking them to correct that and a few other issues. And in fact, they got worse. After asking them to please include the impacts on the endangered orcas, they responded by saying, essentially, it's too late to help recover endangered species in Seattle. And they removed the word recovery from the document. And I was puzzled because NOAA has orca and salmon recovery plans that both recommend protecting both urban and rural areas. So somebody mentioned, is anyone going to appeal this? I didn't know what that was. I started looking into it. I didn't really know it was a legal action. I thought it was just another form of public input, like a public comment, maybe one step up from public comment. And all along, even during the public comment period, I was reaching out to friends who were biologists because I was predominantly a science trajectory student and switched to music at the last minute. So I've always felt very comfortable in the scientific world and I have lots of friends in science. But it really did bring up the question, what does the public do if council and staff don't respond? What options do you have if you're pointing out legitimate errors? Because the feedback I was getting from the scientific community was it's not only got significant errors, but there were many more that I wasn't aware of.
So from your perspective, this was an environmental impact statement that had cut corners and you were really concerned. And so you started this appeal process. And for the listeners to understand what happened next, the appeal was initially dismissed by the city, but then you appealed it up to the state level. So the Court of Appeals for the state of Washington then ruled in your favor. And so now, if I understand correctly, Seattle's hearing examiner has to consider your case. If you could just summarize, what are the biggest concerns you have right now when it comes to how the EIS was conducted?
Trees and green space are well known for reducing and cooling polluted runoff. Salmon need cool, clean water to thrive. So I had concerns about the lack of assessment. Shoreline and Bellevue published tree hydrology numbers for their entire canopy in their canopy cover assessments, and Seattle did not. So without that information, if we're embarking on an unprecedented upzone, wouldn't we want to be really cautious and accurate in our assessment of what impacts there would be on the environment so that we can have both? One of the studies I encountered in this process showed that there was no loss of density when protecting trees and green space. So to me, it's how we do it. It's not if. I know we're going to densify, and I'm pro-density, but there are many ways to do this.
So when Councilmember Eddie Lin was on the show yesterday, He argued that, first of all, Seattle has much cleaner and greener rules than many other places in the country. The state of Washington has cleaner and greener rules. He also said that the comprehensive plan, by building in more density, would reduce sprawl, and that means, fewer greenhouse gas emissions and overall a better impact on the environment. He also said that the plan allows for updates to stormwater control. Lin said this.
What we have seen is that new growth actually can be environmentally friendly. It allows us to clean up some of our contaminated sites in the city if we redevelop.
What do you say about his argument that the comp plan is actually the environmentally friendly thing to move forward with, this higher density plan?
I wouldn't leave it to developers and assume that everything is going to be okay. And I don't think it precludes having a high quality EIS. I think they're two separate discussions. The EIS is there to inform the how do we develop without destroying this beautiful shared ecosystem. And on the stormwater subject, the code is referring mostly to construction. So once that property is built, the maintenance of those stormwater infrastructures on site are left to the homeowner. So that it's entirely up to, does the homeowner maintain them? A lot of times you'll see around Seattle, these new gutters are detached because the people don't understand how to take care of it, and the city doesn't actually enforce or inspect. A lot of the times you'll see water just running down into the street.
Councilmember Lin, we heard from the introduction there, is also making an argument about power and leverage and who has a voice in this process. He's saying basically that these appeals are being misused or abused by people who have, a lot of resources, who are basically able to gum up the works of this huge project for the city council with very little at stake. Like, it's a $125 filing fee, and an individual can grind the gears of the city council to a stop for months at a time, if not more. And he's basically saying that it's adding to bureaucracy that then slows down things like housing production, and bureaucracy, not democracy. What do you make of that argument that he's bringing forth?
Regarding the statement about wealthy or people with a lot of resources, I would question what data are these claims being based on. To my knowledge, I've never shared my income with council, and I would not consider myself wealthy. As far as the delays, I have never asked for a delay. I don't want a delay. I did not envision that was something that was even part of the process. I've never filed anything like this before. The city chose to delay by wrongfully dismissing the case. And even in the Court of Appeals, there were delays filed by the city. For example, in June, they had the option to respond as early as June 4th to move forward, and they waited until July 1 without any response. I would say two things. If we had a great quality EIS in the first place, there would have been no appeal. And if we had gone through the hearing examiner in the first place, rather than going through this dismissal process, we would be done by now.
So this proposal that the council member put forward and the city council is going to be considering, it targets these administrative appeals to Seattle's hearing examiner for what are known as non-project actions. So like the big rezoning things like the comprehensive plan. It still leaves open the appeals process for individual projects. So if there is a major freeway planned or if there is a big building planned, those can still be appealed in this way. It's just the big rezones that are potentially on the chopping block, those appeals. And others have pointed out, you can still sue in King County Superior Court. Of course, that means that the law will have already moved forward. Or there's the Growth Management Hearing Board at the state level. Why would those avenues for appeal not be sufficient going forward? Why do you need this non-project appeal to the hearing examiner?
Well, I'm not an expert and I'm not a lawyer. My understanding is that it actually takes longer to go through King County Superior Court and the GMHB, and they would be filed after the damage is already done. So in my mind, it does make more sense to address issues before damage is done. And in the Court of Appeals, Judge Mann said several times, why wouldn't you want to have the best information in front of council before they make their decision? That's the intention of the hearing examiner appeal, is to make sure that they are able to consider environmental and ecological factors regarding the quality of the environment. And also, the number of appeals is actually fairly low when I look at even the city's own data. It's 28 SEPA appeals to the hearing examiner between 2016 to 2026, and 19 were pretty quickly dismissed or withdrawn.
So you're basically saying it's not that big of a burden on the city, except, I mean, this has stopped the comp plan from moving forward at this point. And I guess somebody like Lin might say when they hit, they really cause a big delay, and that's a bigger problem for the city. Lin mentioned that there are laws that regulate, tree canopy, for example. There's the tree ordinance that passed recently, although it was highly controversial. There are stormwater laws. There are energy laws. There are basically pathways legislatively to address a lot of the concerns related to what's going into our water, how many trees we have in our lots. He's arguing that that's the right place to be advocating for that and not in this appeals process. What do you say to that?
I have watched for years people advocating exactly in that way, going to council, revealing errors and issues and massive tree loss to council and not seeing any change happen. So my question would be, is he proposing something different than the current process that will actually make changes in these pieces of legislation? For example, the stormwater code went up for update this year. And in the beginning of the stormwater code, it says, it refers back to the EIS that I'm appealing, essentially saying, we've done our work already in the EIS. We can move forward with this. However, some of the things they indicate in the EIS, such as peak flow control measures, they say that they are going to strengthen them in the stormwater code, and the stormwater code weakened them. And a number of community members, hundreds of people wrote letters, and it was not changed. So we have two documents that conflict with each other. One says the stormwater code will take care of this, but the stormwater code protections were weakened. So I would be curious what a solution Eddie could provide for that. And I would like to mention the Lake Washington study was only considering phosphorus and water clarity.
This is the study that Lin mentioned during our interview where he said, over time as the city has grown, the study indicated that there has been better visibility in Lake Washington, for example. Basically, he was arguing that the water quality has improved as Seattle density has increased, suggesting that either density and water quality can coexist, or even that density might help water quality, for people to understand what the King County study is that you're talking about.
Yeah, I had actually discussed this study with a King County water toxicologist, and it was focused on phosphorus and clarity, phosphorus typically does go down during development because it's typically used as a fertilizer. So you'll find it in agricultural uses or when people have yards and gardens. With increased development, you'll have more impervious surfaces and like driveways and roofs, and people don't typically fertilize hard surfaces like driveways. So that is a normal outcome that you would see, but that study is not covering the range of contaminants that are problematic in Puget Sound and for salmon, like toxins, contaminants, temperature, turbidity.
Before we go, Jennifer, can I just ask you personally how it has been to be in this discussion? Because I know you've been called a NIMBY. You've been having people get really mad at you for what they see as being an obstacle to building more housing, basically the urbanist perspective of wanting to see density increase, affordability issues be addressed through density, environmental issues be addressed through density. The backlash that you received, I'm sure, has been difficult. I just wonder how it has been personally for you to be a part of this.
It has been surprising to encounter that. However, I feel there's much more to the story there are a lot of assumptions being made about me, and I don't really have the chance to respond to them in a meaningful way. I feel like a lot of the allegations are coming from places that I can't engage with. There aren't comment sections or a way to really meaningfully engage. But to me, what the other Washington, they're stripping environmental protections left and right. And there's no loss of density shown by the Nature Conservancy when protecting green space and trees. I find it puzzling why there wouldn't be a desire to protect a shared ecosystem that also impacts human health.
Jennifer Godfrey is the founder of Orca Nexus, which is behind what's known as the Orca Appeal, which is questioning the effectiveness and rigorousness of the environmental impact statement for Seattle's comprehensive plan. Thank you very much for joining me, Jennifer, and for talking through all of this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.